The 1960s was a time of free love, psychedelic music, expanding consciousness, and drilling holes in your skull to get high. Yep, you heard that right. Today, we're exploring the practice of trepanation, where tripped-out hippies believed that creating a hole in their skull could elevate their minds to whole new heights. We'll uncover the big players, their made-up science, and the cult-like following of those who dared to drill for a higher state of being. That's what you're in for today on Impolite Society.
Oh, I just detest rude, unladylike young ladies.
I hope you don't mind me being a tad rude.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Don't be rude.
That is some weird, wild stuff.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's a scandal!
But it's provocative.
Please stop making me blush.
Welcome back to Impolite Society. I am hard-headed Laura.
And I am full-skulled Rachel. I got it all. No holes. Well, except for the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And I guess the spinal column.
All the regular holes.
All the standard issued holes. There and everywhere.
So I want to ask you a question, Rachel, because I remember you mentioning you were also a fan of the old Showtime show, Dead Like Me. Do you remember Mason, the British kind of tripped out dude from the 60s?
I do like the show. I rediscovered it on Amazon recently, and I watched the first 2 episodes, bawled my eyes out at the pilot. That's not fair.
The pilot is the best.
That's not fair. Like, don't do that to me, please. Was Mason in that, or was that a different cute white guy that they then replaced? I feel like they switched cute white guys at some point.
I don't think they did, but it's been a while since I watched the full series, but I know he's in at least the first couple of episodes.
Okay.
Do you remember how he died?
No, I actually don't, but I remember he was like crushable.
Yes.
Sorry, that's
yes,
not relevant.
He was. No, he was adorable. Okay, so let me remind you. The Grim Reaper Mason, played by Callum Blue, in the show, he died in 1966 in his attempt to achieve a permanent high by drilling a hole in his head with a power drill.
Now, you would think I would remember that, so
it's in like
wild.
episode 3 or 4 because I looked it up.
Well,
doing the show note.
Amazon only gives you 2 episodes for free. I don't understand why they did that, but
so this show, Dead Like Me, it was the first time, and honestly, possibly the only time I had ever heard of such a thing. And this show aired back in 2002 or whatever. But that image has always stuck with me in the back of my brain, thinking, what the fuck was that all about? Is that a real thing? Did people drill a hole in their head in the 60s to get high? Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we have this podcast. So I have an excuse to look into the internet archives, look into the back of my brain and pull this thing out from 2002 and find out what the fuck is this all about and report it back to my friend Rachel.
And this one is definitely a sleeper because I would never have thought of this topic. I had no idea about it. And it's very interesting. It's fascinating.
I went on the deepest dive, man.
It's wild. This is insane. Well, I don't know how the guys in the dollop haven't done this yet because I feel like they would eat this. Like, listen to us, amateurs, and then I forgot their names, but you guys would eat it up.
Yeah, the definitely ripe for some improv for sure.
Yeah, we don't have those skills. We have internet research skills.
Yes,
and vague audio editing skills.
So the short answer to my burning question from 2002 is that yes, this is a real thing that people did in the 1960s.
Nuts.
And well before then. It's called trepanning, or also trepanation, or trephenation. Sometimes they make a PH and F sound. I don't know why. Maybe British to Dutch to whatever translation. I don't know. But it is a surgical procedure where a hole is drilled into the patient's skull, and it is legitimately one of the oldest surgeries that are known to man.
My head is literally hurting already. As soon as you said drill a hole into your head, the pain that I feel, like the headache is starting. I should have taken an Advil before we started recording because I viscerally feel this.
Oh, but I say drilled.
Oh,
but this procedure has been taking place long before we had power drills or even hand drills, like the little like twisty ones. So in ancient cases, the hole was scraped into the skull. And I just want you to let that settle over you and kind of marinate for a moment. Ancient human letting someone scrape the bone of their skull away from their brain with no anesthesia, or at least not any good ones, right? Because herbal medicine can only take ancient man so high.
Yeah, my head is definitely hurting after thinking of that. Oh my gosh, that's insane. Seriously, what is wrong with us as a species? Like, what? As if life wasn't hard enough for prehistoric humans, right? Threat of death, starvation. You're like, you can die any second. But, let's just scrape our fucking skulls away. Why not, Add
Expose some
insult
brain
to-
matter. It's great.
That will only help, surely. But, okay, but that's my gut reaction. Now that I'm thinking about it more, I'm like, humans have always been somewhat logical, right? Like, cause and effect, right? Even if that logic doesn't translate. So, like, they didn't just do this really, unless this is like some kind of torture system, but I don't think it is. There had to have been a reason they were doing it, right?
Yes, absolutely. So skeletons having these holes, they've come up all over the globe, all across human history. Oldest ones up to about 6,000 BC, roundabout. And the reasons for trepanation are speculative because, anthropologists, we can only figure out so much. And it's also going to vary according to culture. So it could have been for spiritual reasons, like opening a third eye. It could have been primitive care for head wounds. And as we get into the Middle Ages, the reasons they speculate, and honestly, from some legitimate writings, as well as some art that done at the time, that the reasons may have been to let out some evil spirits or madness, or as simple as to cure some migraines.
That's what I've heard, right? And I guess back then, migraines could have been considered evil spirits. Mm-hmm. But any frame of reference I had for drilling holes in your head was from the lens of like, oh, we think that they did this to relieve migraines that people had, chronic migraines, which my husband has really bad migraines. Luckily, they've slowed down a lot as he ages, but from how I've seen him react, I'm sure if you had those all the time or every day, you might be willing to let somebody scrape your skull away because those are no fun.
And they do come across like a pulsation, right? Or like very specific,
yeah,
like in a very localized area. So it does kind of track, right?
My husband has been getting them since he was like a little baby before he could articulate what was happening. And
his poor parents. That's what
I know. His mom was like, I never got to go anywhere because I was always at home with the vomiting child. But how he articulated it before he had the language was he said, my head goes beep, beep, beep. And that broke my heart.
That is sad.
Because my husband, flawed human, we all are. But him as a toddler, beep, beep. I would have said, just like, oh, that poor baby. Nowadays, I'm like, come on, Papa Advil,
get over it.
Go hide in the room. Be like, you can get over this. We have children to take care of. But thinking of him as a child, I'm like, oh my gosh, life is cruel.
It is.
And we don't know why. Still don't to this day.
Still don't. Yeah, we still have no idea what fucking causes migraines. But Dan, your husband, might have been in good company back in the day because they were actually really good at trepanning. Trepanning?
Trepanning. I like trepanning. I think
it's trepanning, I believe.
What? Oh my God. I read it all as trepanning. I feel like that sounds smarter.
So the skulls that have been found with this process done, they have soft edges in the bone holes. So It indicates to anthropologists that the wounds had healed and the person had actually lived for a good amount of time after the procedure.
But at what cost?
Well, we'll get into that, okay? What the cost of this could potentially be. The secret to this kind of procedure and surviving it successfully is actually to not touch the brain. They want to get into the yeah, makes sense. They want to get to the skull only. So if the dura mater is punctured, that is the most outside layer of your meninges that covers the brain. So, you know, your brain is like, it's not just floating around your skull. There's like a sack basically around your brain.
Mine is floating because it's like full of fluid in there and the brain's like, help.
Well, it is floating, but it's floating in this sack. And if you puncture that sac, the dura mater, you'd be done for because there's infection, your cerebral spinal fluid is all leaking out and shit, and it's no good. So the idea is to only go through the skull and stopping before you get to the brain and its meninges.
That sounds like a very minimal margin of error. And you might say it was the world's first game of operation, quite literally. But but instead of that sound, you just get sprayed in the face with cerebral spinal fluid.
And a lot of blood. Because there's a lot of blood geysers in the research of this episode.
No.
So, but this is not all just ancient history. We still do trepanning today. We don't call it trepanation, though. Doctors might crack open a skull for a living patient of many, many reasons.
Like outside of brain surgery, right? Like this is just breaking the skull for breaking the skull's sake. Because like getting into the brain, like to take out a tumor or clot or something.
That's part of it. That is exactly part of it. So that you start with the trepanation and then move into the brain if you're doing some sort of tumor excision. What do you?
Oh, so that means my father-in-law's had trepanation.
Yeah, if they got into his skull, absolutely. They opened it and they cracked in there.
Now he's got a cow skull.
One of the common surgeries to do this process, again, under another name, is a craniotomy. And this is where a hole is drilled in the skull to relieve pressure and swelling on the brain after some kind of head trauma. You know, swelling.
Like a TBI.
Exactly. Yeah. Back to our traumatic
Laura always
brain
has
injuries.
a theme to her episodes. Like
I get into a hyperfixation.
You can follow her train of thought. At least we've moved from genitals and buttholes.
And
making them
to
prettier.
Something new. The brain.
I like it.
So the key difference is that in a craniotomy or these modern procedures, like your father-in-law, is that if a piece of skull is removed, which is called a bone flap, FYI, and it is replaced as soon as possible. So once the healing has begun, the swelling has gone down, it's replaced so that the skull can mend itself, either with that own piece of bone flap it took out or apparently a cow skull. Mm-hmm. And truly, I could do a whole other episode on ancient trepanning, but I'm trying to focus. I'm trying to zero in on what
the topic at hand, which is a very specific reason for doing it.
Exactly. And in the 1960s, trepanation got a whole new purpose, which was getting high, man.
I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it. That one.
It does boggle your mind, right? It's the 1960s. You know, beatniks, counterculture, sexual revolution on the way. What a fucking trippy ass time to be alive. Like I feel like the whole of human society is just like, whop. You know?
Turned upside down.
Yes.
But with all that sexual liberation, can we not be sure that they weren't just looking for another hole, man? Like, for other reasons?
Truly, you can't rule it out at this point.
God, that made my head hurt even more. The idea of like, Now that's a different kind of podcast. That is a true crime podcast, and you do not get that shit here.
It's like Jeffrey Dahmer shit.
Okay. We're not doing that.
Nope.
We're just doing the classy kind of brain, like skull mutilation, where the person lives, ideally.
All right. So let me introduce you to the grand poobah of the modern trepanation movement, Mr. Bart Hughes or Hughes. It depends on, he's Dutch, so I'm just going to say Hughes throughout, but I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Hi, Bart the Hughes. We want to date. Oh, you want to date me like you want another hole in your head? That can be arranged.
So Bart Hughes, he was born 1934 in Amsterdam. His father was a doctor, and so naturally, Bart went to medical school just like the old man at the old University of Amsterdam. But this is the 60s, baby, because turn on, tune in, drop out, all the rage. He started smoking a lot of pot and doing acid. And in fact, he named his daughter, born around this time, as Maria Joanna, and decided to jet set around the world.
That's a literal hate crime.
What, naming his daughter Maria Joanna?
Yes.
Apparently, it got him kicked out of the University of Amsterdam, but I call bullshit on that because he also failed one of his exams. So I think that's what got kicked him out. But
Yeah,
he blames naming his child marijuana.
I don't think they care what you name your kid
Yeah.
in college.
There-
Maybe
there's-
they're like, don't have a kid while you're in college, but that's...
Well, he's like grad school, like doctor, like kind of level.
Well, who
but
I
this is the
imagine it wasn't
60s.
his wife that he was knocking out at this point.
There's a lot of revisionist history going on, as you'll see kind of throughout this.
Well, he can't think. He has a hole in his head.
So Bart, or Mr. Huge, Hughes.
Mr. Huge.
Sorry.
Huge Bart.
He went to travel the world, and I'm sure that he would say that he was finding himself, right? Finding the truth of the universe and all that hippie shit that people say. But this is Impolite Society. Let's talk a little plainly. This is the judgment zone. I am owning it. This is a rich kid who is now an adult taking his fucking trust fund and going on vacation and getting high. He went to fucking Ibiza, for God's sakes. Time is it's a flat circle. Things never change.
Hey, Ibiza is the central hub of enlightenment in the old world. Did you know? I heard that the Catholic Church was considering setting up their headquarters there before they landed on Vatican City. But then they thought, oh, it already has the name, so we might as well do it there.
I don't think that's historically accurate. So,
Does accuracy matter in this day and age?
whatever you say is true is true.
If you believe it, it's your reality.
Oh, that's
Perception
100%.
Is reality.
That's 100% what Bart Hughes would say.
I'm getting in the mindset, or like the missing mindset.
Mine's a missing skull set. So in Ibiza, Bart met a bunch of other trust fund dropouts who were getting high, and Bart had a revelation. That getting high wasn't really about drugs. Though, don't get him wrong, I mean, drugs are pretty cool. It was about blood in the brain.
Oh.
Brain blood volume. More blood equals more high or more expanded consciousness.
Okay, so this is kind of like that we only use 20% of our brain in any given moment type situation.
Exactly. Because let's not be pedestrian and say we like doing drugs because it's fun. Oh, no. His goal's so much loftier. He wants to expand human consciousness, open everyone's third eye, and change the world, man.
Oh, I don't think I need a third eye. I've seen enough, honestly. I see enough.
Well, Bart would say you already have your third eye opened, actually. If you're like a more enlightened soul already, you probably don't need trepanation because you are already enlightened.
I'm an enlightened soul?
Apparently, it's very...
I'm
I'll talk
grounded.
about that
I'm
in
like
a
a
minute.
hefty
Okay.
soul. I'm not light. This is a hefty
Nothing
soul.
light over here.
You're right.
So Hughes, he was an academic after all. So he wrote his own thesis, but on a scroll. So he's not writing it on a typewriter like some kind of square. He wrote it out in like big dramatic lettering, like very creative writing scroll.
Like a monk.
Yes. Uh-huh. And his hypothesis was on, quote, the fall of man, that by evolving to walk on two legs, we greatly impacted the blood flow to our brains in a negative way.
So he's saying that horse girl's right. That girl who gallops around on all fours like a horse and does jumps and shit. She's the ideal specimen of humanity.
He would fucking love her. 100%.
God damn.
Because gravity was the enemy to higher thinking. Yeah, the tits and the brain. So we would be a whole new species with this problem corrected. We would be Homo sapiens correctus. And there was also a bunch of other shit that he espoused at this time about sugar and metabolism and how to avoid a bad trip with LSD. You need to eat a pound of sugar.
That sounds right.
I didn't look too far into that one, but, take it for what it's worth.
It's like the opposite of modern thinking about sugar. Cool. But no, that's a pretty wild take. Because, bipedalism, that's really been a detriment to our species. That's why we're doing so poorly overall, especially compared to our closest biological relatives, the great apes. Like, they're crushing it.
Yeah.
And we're falling behind.
You're getting into the hubris of this kind of way of thinking of the rich, entitled
That's literally
kid.
insane.
Yep. So he also theorized that children and babies, they are so full of wonder, curiosity, imagination. It's all because they have plenty of blood in their brains. So because our skulls aren't fully fused until around 20 to 25 years old, dependent on the person, the fontanelles and other open sutures in children's skulls allow the brain to pulsate with every heartbeat.
So that's why kids can see ghosts. They're coming into their brains through the holes. I buy that. That's canon to me now.
That's kind of thing that Bart would absolutely agree with. Because they have this expanded consciousness, they can see other planes and other dimensions.
I have my third eye open. I'm good. I don't need a hole.
You're good. You're just like John Lennon. We'll get to that. So
I think I am. That's the man in me.
In adults, the idea is that there is a static pressure of cerebrospinal fluid and blood, that it doesn't increase or decrease with any heartbeat. Like you pump in blood into your vessels in your brain, and then cerebrospinal fluid kind of comes out, and there's a homeostasis. But with kids, or those with a hole in their head, the pressure changes with each beat. So when more blood can come into the vessels in your brain, more cerebrospinal fluid can kind of be pushed out of the way through this hole. So it's basically, it comes down to relieving pressure, just like if you have a concussion and the doctors need to do a craniotomy. But this is just for everyday living. With every beat, you get more blood in the brain.
Which is just a thing about the nature of children, right? They have all this extra space in their brain for blood, but the more I'm around children, the tighter my skull seems to fit. It's like it shrinks, and they just suck that out of you.
I think Bart would say that maybe you are not third eye open then at that point.
I kid. But, I mean, he's a rich dude who left his child. He doesn't know what it's like to be around a toddler all day.
He does not. He went to fucking Ibiza. So Bart tried standing on his head to get more blood to the brain.
Start. Fair start.
Yeah, that was hard work. Rich kids, they don't like hard work. So he thought the next best thing would be opening a hole in his skull so that his brain can expand, fill with more blood, and live in this permanent state of childlike wonder.
Okay. So he made a couple big jumps there, right? I could think of, top of my head, at least 4 different things to try before cutting a hole in your head. I'm not going to list it.
No, I want them. I want to hear your top 4 ideas against drilling a hole in your head to get more blood in your brain.
Off the top of my head, lay down. 2, we don't be like a baby, crawl everywhere.
That's fun.
Down the street of Ibiza. Crawl. Sleep like a bat, perhaps, perchance.
Oh, you can get one of those things where like you strap your feet.
Inverters. Yeah, be a bat. Be a vampire.
Be a Batman.
Vampire brat.
Brat.
I mean, Bart.
No, that's about right. Brat.
Last one. Do cardio. Get your blood pumping. Get more blood to your brain, right? Cardio.
He wasn't
moves
into
your blood.
exercise.
Obviously. I mean, is that a picture of him you have in the notes?
It is. It is
Yeah,
a
that
picture of him.
man doesn't work out.
He's just like a giant string bean.
Yeah,
He's in his 20s,
not
30s.
lift, bro.
Yeah, he does not lift. He does not lift. So Bart's biggest obstacle was finding a doctor that would do this procedure for him. And shocker, he did not get any takers, even in the 60s. So he decided to do it himself. And in 1965, he gathered an electric drill, a surgical knife, and a syringe full of local anesthetic, and bro got to work.
And hopefully he also had like a mirror or something,
He
because I'm
did.
like thinking about the logistics of this. Unless that third eye is very specifically placed, like I can't see my head.
He did do it in front of the mirror. And in fact, that picture that you're looking at, that is him in front of a mirror.
Is that him doing it?
Yes.
Weird.
We'll post that somewhere, I'm sure.
I thought he was airbrushing paint onto him.
Nope, that is legitimately him drilling a hole into his head. I think it's a
Okay.
dentist drill.
And he just went straight for the top.
Yep.
Wow.
And it took 45 minutes, but Bart was now the first Homo sapien correctus in the modern age. He said that about 4 hours after the procedure, the feeling came rushing in. He is as light as a feather. He feels 14 again, had no hangups or no neuroses.
14? Like that's his ideal age?
Apparently.
That's a bold take. That's bold.
I feel like 14 is a little bit too old, but then again, this is the 60s. Like kids grew up like a little bit slower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like maybe think like 10.
10. Okay. Like I could do 10, like 8 maybe, I would say
Yeah.
is the ideal. 8
Yeah.
seems like a good age.
Well, he publicly unveiled his new evolved state. It was in some kind of public event. I wasn't quite clear on it. It seemed like it was some sort of street performance. There
He's
was
gonna
no
steal the show. What an asshole.
there was no press there. There was no pictures of it in any case that anybody could find. But where he unwound his bandages to reveal the hole and reveal to society what he had done.
That's like a superhero movie playing where the supervillain comes in and is like, look at
100%.
me now.
100%.
And everyone's like, "Ah!"
One of the articles I read, this is the most Joker thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And fun fact, actually, in each like row of the bandage that he undid, it said ha 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 in psychedelic colors every time
Oh,
he
so he's just mentally ill.
One might think.
I
but-
mean, if you didn't
know.
guess it so far, the ha ha ha's really sealed the deal. Like maybe his dad should have just paid attention to him.
So Bart Hughes, he was involuntarily committed for a few days after this. So apparently somebody got word of it.
They're like, ugh.
Yeah. But eventually they did, in fact, let him go. He was not invited back to his university in Amsterdam. And in fact, he was banned from entering the UK ever again.
I mean, that seems kind of harsh. Like, it's not a contagious disease.
This is like Cold War shit, right? Like hippies and communism and like all
Oh,
this
yeah.
kind of shit of
Sure.
like, we don't want these like counterculture people here,
These
basically.
weirdos.
Yes,
Get out of here,
exactly.
you weirdos.
Precisely. So our enlightened man does what he does best. He goes back to Ibiza to party with some other drugged out rich kids.
I mean, who wouldn't if they could?
Precisely. And he starts talking about trepanning a lot. He even tried to convince John Lennon of the Beatles about this process, though he did tell John Lennon, like I said, that he didn't think that he needed it.
Oh,
John
okay.
Lennon needed
Yeah.
it because he was so creative and open-minded, and he was probably already living in a state of expanded
Childlike wonder.
consciousness.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like maybe his skull didn't fully fuse when he was, when he was 25 or whatever. But John Lennon did consider it, and he talked to Paul McCartney about it and asked if he wanted to try it with him, but Paul declined, and eventually so did John.
Well, that's good, I guess.
But Hughes did get another convert eventually, a gentleman of the name of Joseph Mellon. So Mellon, he was a member of British nobility. He attended Eton and Oxford College. And I imagine he probably had a great big trust fund, or whatever the nobility version of a trust fund in the 60s. I don't know. He had money. So Mellon and Hughes, they made quite the dynamic duo. They made it their mission to tell the world about trepanning, and they imagined a whole new world made in their image with every ill of society cured. But before they did that, of course, Mellon had to take the plunge as well. And Mellon attempted to self-trepan, count 'em, 4 times.
Oh, God.
First, he used a hand trepan, like the ones that were used in the Middle Ages, which is basically like a corkscrew. Like, yeah, imagine like a wine corkscrew. Yeah, it didn't work. But also he was high on LSD and didn't quite have the stick-to-itness to get it done.
I just like poked his head once and I was like, okay, next thing.
Second time, he managed to get a helper, but he fainted from the blood loss. And it is a lot of blood, guys, because head wounds bleed like a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
The third time, they thought they had done it because he felt and heard the gurgle of blood and cerebrospinal fluid from the hole. Just like imagine popping a cork of champagne, right? Like, and then you feel the whoosh, rushing.
But it just like drizzles and like runs down their face.
Yep. But no, actually, turns out he had not completely broken through, and he was not fully trepanned until 1970. How he survived in such a Homo sapien fashion while surrounded by such geniuses, I'll never know. But you can't build an expanded consciousness society with only 2 people, Rachel.
Of course not. But like, man, I want to be so rich that I'm so bored that the only thing I can think of to do is drill a hole in my head. Like, they could do anything, and that's what they chose to do. Wild.
I think it's the drugs, honestly. I do. I think it's the LSD, and I think it's like the whole like counterculture movement and like all this thing about how we're not living to our full potential and life could be something totally different. And it's just like this zeitgeist, right? Like it all rolls together into this storm of insanity.
Capitalism, baby, trying to sell you a better life. He's like, I could fix it all if you give me money and let me drill your head. Okay, but how are they going to grow this? How are they going to get more people?
So, our little cult clearly needed a third. It was getting to be quite the sausage party. At least.
Well, how are you going to breed more holy head babies?
Exactly. So, they added a woman to the gang. Amanda Felding. She started out dating Hughes. Then she began a relationship with Mellon. I have to imagine that these guys all fucked a lot, right? Like
and together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ugh.
This is the 60s. They're not into traditional anything, let alone traditional relationships. So, this was like one big, like, throuple and all this kind of shit.
There's probably more people involved.
Oh, on numerous occasions. Definitely. Yeah. So, Felding, she was from Britain, and she is, in fact, Countess Amanda Felding.
Oh, my gosh.
And she is related to the Habsburgs.
Oh, we remember them.
Maybe she's inbred a little bit. We could count that on her.
Girl never stood a chance.
Felding was the helper that assisted Mellon with his initial cork-popping party, and it was her turn to take the plunge.
As a member of the Habsburg clan, may I suggest, if you're interested in removing bone, perhaps start with the jaw, chin area. Like, chisel that off before you start on your skull. Just a thought.
I've seen videos and pictures of her. She does not have the crazy. So she must be like, several removed.
They got some good genes in there.
Yeah, she's
genetic diversity.
She's solid. Yeah.
Well, not in her skull.
But it really does take a woman to get things done right, doesn't it? Because she did it perfectly the first try. I mean, it might help that she had 2 other people to learn from during this time, but, here nor there. But best of all, she and Mellon filmed it. They made a short movie about this whole process.
No.
And the movie is about what you'd expect it to be. It's about a woman standing in front of a mirror, taping her hair back, putting on a shower cap, Anna's, sterilizing all of her shit, drilling into her own head, blood everywhere. Because as we said, head wounds bleed like a bitch. You can't view the whole thing. You can only view clips of it online. It's never been fully released.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah. Amanda, who is now older and wiser, she does not think that auto-trepanation is a good idea anymore. She doesn't kind of want it going out as a self-guide. And also, the few people that she showed it to in a showing passed out, which I believe there was a lot of blood. A lot of blood. Yeah.
So, okay, where does this, so many questions. Where does it go? Where is the hole?
Think third eye. Like right underneath your hairline or like right at your hairline.
So it's just, they drill right there. For whatever reason, I was thinking it was like at the back of the head.
No, not in the back. It's more in the front, like top of the forehead.
So
all
basically that soft spot where the babies have that soft spot. They're just like reopening that?
No, the soft spot's like right on the top.
Yeah, okay.
Like this is like right here. So they're auto-trepanning. They're doing it themselves. So they have to be able to see it. Right
Yeah,
in the
that's why
mirror.
I was thinking it was like up there. I don't know.
No, it's like right center forehead. So again, like think right where your hairline is, or if you want to shave back a little bit, like right there. So it's definitely in the forehead region.
So then what happens? It's done. You did it.
Mhm.
You have a hole in your head. What do you just do? How do you go back to life?
So they cut and then fold it back. The skin flap.
Yeah.
So think about it in the sense that actually this is not a hugely painful procedure because your skin and the muscles attaching your skull to your muscles, that allow your forehead to move and all this different kind of stuff, that has feeling. Your skull has no nerve endings, as well as your brain. And then
really?
like the meninges,
Oh, I
which
guess it
hopefully you're not
doesn't.
touching, has no nerve endings. So by injecting the local anesthesia,
That's just for the skin.
that's just for the skin and the muscle, as long as you get enough. And for me, who had my lipoma removed from my neck with, again, only local anesthesia, you can withstand it, right? So you put that anesthesia in, you cut the flap, fold it down, and then you start the drilling process. And then once you're done, once you've broken through, you flip it up and just kind of put a big old Band-Aid on it. And it heals.
But isn't there like an indentation or something?
Yes, there will be. And in the videos,
And I'm sure wearing a hat hurts too. Like that can't be comfortable.
Well, it depends on where it hits, I guess. It depends on where the hat hits. But if you guys really want to get deep into it,
And like,
I
what
did,
if you hit your head on something? I hit my
Oh.
head a lot.
No, that's legitimate because like if you have a skull injury, your skull is basically has less integrity.
Shock absorption.
Your skull can crack more easily because it's got a fucking hole in it.
Yeah.
Like it can't absorb the same kind of pressure. So there is definitely a danger involved in it.
Oh my god.
Structural integrity is degraded by this whole
So
scenario.
if somebody walked in with one of these, you could tell.
You'd have to look for it in the videos that I watched. If you guys want to dive deep into the research, which I did for this fucking episode, the links are fucking fascinating, especially the YouTube documentaries. This is like from the late 80s. And you can see these people that they're interviewing, they have like this little dent right there
so
in the
it's
forehead.
small. I don't know why I'm imagining it.
Oh,
like,
no, yeah. No,
size of a
It's
half
small.
dollar.
It's like maybe an inch,
Okay.
if that, like whole.
So then, does it close up? Do they have to re-up it or whatever
No.
after a while?
No, it won't close. It won't close on its own. Your bone will not regrow it. No.
Oh, I thought that that's what was a sign of like the people survived it in the past was that there was like bone.
It was the edges that were softer, right?
Oh.
So it wasn't just like straight drill, so they knew that they had died on the table. Like there's a certain amount of wear that's going to happen if you live, with your skull being partially opened.
Why did I think that it was like healed? That was information I misunderstood.
No, that's good. It's good to have questions on this one because it is a very like I have done at least 8 hours of research on this topic.
That's insane.
So
this is
please
wild.
clarify.
This is
Please
like
ask.
the wildest one.
I love this one. I'm fucking obsessed. So
Why were they all doing this to themselves? Why did not get somebody else to do it?
because they couldn't get a legitimate surgeon to do this for them.
No, I'm talking about, well, I guess if the guy fucked it up 3 times and then you were like, maybe you shouldn't do my head. But like the fact that, like, why would you just not let one of the other 2 guys drill your head? Why not?
I think for Amanda, it was more of a performance art thing. Like she filmed the whole thing and did the whole like voiceover and all that kind of thing. And one thing about this movie that was not expected was the inclusion of her bird in many of these shots.
Aww.
So Birdie was her beloved pet, and it was a pigeon. And I do mean very literally that it was beloved. She and Birdie had, according to her, a passionate love affair in which they communicated telepathically. And just so you know, this was before the hole in the head. It's just her regular high life or just regular crazy. Who's to say?
Yeah, this person needed some help.
I think so, yeah. She's kind of changed things up in her life, at least a little bit. Felding was quite the advocate for trepanation, and she went on to run for parliament twice as a supporter for the key issues that were gripping the British people, like the lack of government-funded holes in your heads. Her platform was trepanation for the national health. And shocker, no one bit. And her attempts at government had failed, but she, since then, has founded what seems to be a semi-credible foundation, the Beckley Foundation, which studies the beneficial uses of psychoactive substances, like some of these more recent research about shrooms and ketamine and
The Mormon moms love that.
for depression and those kinds of things for mental health. This is the kind of work that she does and lives in, and so good for her using her nobility and money to do those things. And her love of trepanation isn't exactly a secret. I mean, she did make a movie about it, and she does sometimes do interviews about it, but she does kind of downplay it. So it's not a part of her, quote, brand. It's not a part of her foundation and their research at the Beckley Foundation. So despite her hole in the head, she does seem to have some sense at this point and is trying to keep her foundation legitimate by not advocating for this kind of procedure.
And she has bangs, so nobody would know she's got a hole in her head.
Yes, that's it. She does have a little bit of bang, if I'm not remembering incorrectly. Yeah.
Yeah, to cover up the hole in her head, I'd imagine. It makes it a little bit more palatable. Because I looked up that guy and it made me viscerally ill a little bit.
You saw the little depression?
Yeah, that's not something I would want to look at day in, day out, personally.
And he's bald, so it's like extra, prominent.
Yeah.
So
that's not his fault, I guess.
No, the bald isn't his fault. The hole in the head, 100% his fault.
Yep. Actually, I want you to commit to it. I admire him. I don't want to look at him, but I admire him. Like, covering it up with bangs.
Make it like...
Boo.
Yeah.
Like, cut a hole. Cut
Own
a little
it.
hole. Yeah, pin it back. You drilled a hole in your head, lady. Own it.
So Mellon and Felding, they had 2 children together in their relationship. They did, they were married, and eventually they separated on good terms. They were remarried then to separate new spouses, and wouldn't you know it, those 2 new spouses got trepanned as well. So what a lovely little cult they have grown.
Do they have like some magical genitals that they're working with? Because I swear to God, I can't even get my husband to watch the same show that I want to watch. Like, and they're convincing these people to drill holes in their heads.
Some people are they just want to be led. You know what I mean? I don't know.
They're fodder for cults.
Truly. And around this time, Bart Hughes, he found another little priest in Peter Halverston. Peter was another rich kid, but plot twist, this one's an American. He dropped out of the University of Cincinnati in 1968. He went globetrotting, eventually got chummy with Hughes in Amsterdam, who I imagine was a little bit depressed because his, love of his life ran off with Mellon and had a bunch of kids and drilled her own hole in their head and said, I don't need you anymore. So Hughes, he recommended Halverston find a doctor to have the procedure done. He would not help him do it himself, maybe because of potential legal issues or because Hughes was kind of done with the whole thing at this point. I don't know. And if you take away anything from this episode, guys, seriously, let it be that you need a buddy to drill a hole in your head.
Buddy system.
Mm-hmm.
Tried and true.
Yeah. But Halverston, he said, fuck it. I got some detailed instructions from a surgeon he met somewhere who told him how to do it. And he got to work on himself. And in a 1972 hotel room in Holland.
Hotel room?
Yep.
That's disrespectful.
Rich kids, man. They don't give a fuck. And so he knew that he had succeeded when he felt that gurgle and pop from his brain.
I mean, straight to jail for that surgeon. Who gave him the means to do that?
It was the 60s.
He should lose his license.
It's a whole new time. I'm sure it was under the table, unofficial. Nobody got a co-paid for this scenario.
Yeah, but the first do no harm.
That's a question. Is it harming or is it expanding consciousness?
I mean, when brain fluid is flying.
Well, brain fluid shouldn't be flying. It's the change in pressure of your brain fluid that they're feeling.
Oh.
So you take out that bit of skull and your brain fluid can kind of like rush forward into that area and
So he felt that happen.
He felt it happen. And he also, was it him or Mellon that when they finally succeeded and got through and took it out, like there was like a geyser of blood that came out and he's like, oh fuck, like I went into my brain, but it wasn't. It was, it was the arteries and veins and such that are through your
connecting
forehead
your
and skull
to your
your
brain.
forehead. Exactly.
Oh God.
Yep. So Halverston, he eventually founded the International Trepanation Advocacy Group at some point. It was hard to nail down the dates here. This is where I was getting deep into it, like the Internet Archives, all that kind of shit. I think it was around 1997. Gathered his own followers on the new invention known as the Internet. And the group's website, trepan.com, now defunct. Had to go to the internetarchives.com to see it. Highly, highly recommend. I mean, pure 1998 website nonsense. Do you remember visitor counters, Rachel?
Remember, we have one on Impolite Society podcast.com.
No, we do not, you
one
fucking
day,
liar.
We want to hit the triple digits. Just kidding. We don't. And I'm sure we have.
So the site leads with third eye innocent and open wide. For the first time on this planet, you are free to have maximum fulfillment. It is no longer necessary to follow a path and search for your true greatness. Also, let me just call out the ridiculousness of that statement. You no longer have to follow a path and search for, like, answers. Fuck that. Just drill a fucking hole in your head.
It's also very sparse. I thought there'd be more.
Oh, you got to click into it. You have to go into the site. There's a video intro if you want to see that. And then you have to like click around. It's not like a navigation like we have nowadays. It's very antiquated.
Oh, and now it's playing sounds.
Yeah. It's a trip, right? I definitely recommend it, listener, if you have some free time.
We'll
check
link
it
it
out.
in the show notes.
Oh, we 100%
I have to turn
will.
it off because of the music. Sorry. It's like overpowering.
Yeah. But the site, it's super culty. It's got a lot of triangles, acronyms.
And eyes and triangles.
Yes, the eyes, the third eye. A lot of vague promises. And this culty facet seems to come from Bart Hughes himself, which is, again, the grandfather of all this bullshit, the first guy. And as Bart got older, he became a bit of a hermit. He didn't even have a phone. And when people came to him to ask about trepanation, because this is kind of like a thing, right? It's like in the zeitgeist.
If you're going to trepanation, like you got to go to the OG man himself.
Exactly. He would not even speak to people unless he memorized his scroll, his thesis, right, on the fall of man.
Oh my gosh.
If these people could recite it, write it out by memory, repeat it 10 times to him while on their knees, then he would talk to them.
For that. That's
apparently he does. And so
nuts.
But Halverston seemed to have taken these culty kind of weird ideas, espoused them on his site. Definitely a guy, in my opinion, that is trying to create his own little cult, soliciting money from people to fund his research.
Oh, wow.
So he promised people that tree pinning would increase people's youthfulness, creativity, and even their testosterone levels.
Why am I not surprised? It all comes back to boners every time.
I thought the same thing. It's like, what a dude thing to do. We got to talk about boners somewhere in here.
Yeah, it just makes your penis harder. And harder more often.
And then he also said, of course it was safe, guys. It's the oldest surgery in the world, so it can't be bad for you or dangerous.
I mean, they amputated people's legs with bone saws in the Wild West. Like, just because they did it a long time ago doesn't make it a good idea.
Precisely.
It was the best they had.
So Halverston went on a press tour of sorts for his little movement, a.k.a. cult. He managed to get on the Howard Stern's show in 1998 and the TV version of Ripley's Believe It or Not. And he even got a 2020 special.
They just been giving those out, apparently.
And apparently this all did work to some degree. The website was actively recruiting people for a pilot study to be done in Mexico. And he got 15 people to actually do it. Some idiots
That's
who had heard...
considerable amount of people.
I know, right? Some idiots who heard about it on Howard Stern or whatever else, I don't know. They paid Peter money. They went to Mexico. They fucking had their skulls drilled into. And I found a really old article from a college newspaper. It was pretty buried, where they interviewed the people who had this done. And oh my God, it is bleak. People who had been on psych holds, schizophrenics, some guy who was spending his money buying eternal youth water. One guy who clearly had a massive man crush on Halverston, like was his little bitch and like wanted to be exactly like him. And then the spouses of these crazies. And it's just, oh, it was so sad.
Well, did the youth water work? Is this guy still kicking it?
I mean, it was 1999, so maybe. I don't know.
Is he youthful, though?
I don't know.
How old is he? Like,
it's hard to find enough shit on these people. This website is defunct.
Yeah. Hey, we're all looking for something to believe in, though. Right? We're just all looking for something to believe in.
But turns out this publicity was actually a bad idea because attention, it got Peter Halverston into some legal hot water. Drilling into the skulls of crazy people is bound to get one in trouble.
One would hope.
And in 2000, Halverston was arrested in the U.S. for practicing medicine without a license when one of the parents of his victims, patients, raised hell after their daughter traveled from England to the U.S. to have her hole drilled into by this totally not a doctor kind of guy. And the court gave him 3 years of probation.
Probation. That does not seem like a lot.
I know, right? Like at first I was thinking, I'm like, really? Fucking that's it? That's all you're going to give this guy? But then I thought there's some deeper questions here about the freedoms of society, right? If you're willing to pay some rando to drill a hole in your head, is that your right? I don't know.
I mean, can you willingly offer up your body for a cannibal to kill and eat?
That's a great question. So the popularity of this website and the pilot study in Mexico, DIY tutorials popping up on the internet, considered dangerous enough for the British Medical Journal to issue a formal warning in the year 2000 that people not drill a hole in their head.
Oh, thank fucking God that the British Medical Journal put that out, because I wouldn't have known not to drill a hole in my head if they had not given a warning. Thank you.
And super well read, right? The British Medical Journal, like everyone's getting
I
that.
mean, that's just where I browse. Every morning I open my phone and I go to the British Medical Journal for life advice. Who doesn't?
So the International Trepanation Advocacy Group website, it was eventually taken offline in 2018. Whether that's through a lack of interest or being shut down, I genuinely don't know. There isn't much out there about this movement right now, nowadays. Not a lot of new articles being written. There were a few from Vice in the late 2010s where clearly one of their writers went down the rabbit hole on this like I did.
They're like, guys, you got to check out this insane shit, man.
Totally. But all this kind of makes me think that this is insanity might be due for a comeback sometime soon, right? With a lot of depressed, desperate people out here who don't trust the medical community, don't feel like they're being heard.
Right.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who are willing to take this bait. And I don't know what Peter Halverson is up to nowadays. I can't find any recent articles about him. But I do know that Bart Hughes, the creator of all this nonsense, he did die in 2004 from alcoholism and related health issues.
Sounds like he needed more holes. Holes somewhere. More holes. Dig them.
Apparently. His consciousness was not as expanded as he thought. After all, he fell to all the same bullshit as the rest of us whole-headed rubes, right?
Right.
So what do doctors think about this? You know, like real doctors with medical degrees. Do they think there's any validity in their saying about, you know, blood-brain volume and pumping blood, blah, blah, blah? No, they do not. It's all nonsense made up by one convincing hippie in the 60s. Someone so convincing that the placebo effect is in full swing with all these people, right? So if you think you are going to experience this intense high, you are going to feel it. I mean, think back on that first time you ever drank any alcohol. I know me, I had 2 swigs of a beer in my sophomore year, and I was like, I'm so drunk, man. So imagine if you had taken these insane leaps to get to this point. Of course you are going to feel elation. You're going to feel whatever effect you think you're going to feel.
So I can think myself high, man. That's the ultimate drug, man.
True.
Your brain, the human brain.
That's
my third eye opening up right there.
It's already open, Rachel. I can tell you
It's
and me.
wide open.
We're so
seize
open.
Everything. It's
I
in the back
seize
of
ya.
my head, though. That's how I watch my kids. I say, hey, get that out of your mouth. Hey, don't kick your sister.
Because, I mean, if you've gotten this insane surgery done and you didn't think it would make a difference, what the fuck would you think of yourself, right? You put yourself at risk for infections, skull fractures, death, all this for nothing, for something that wasn't scientifically proven. So really, in the end, the brain is doing what it does best. Ego protection, baby. That holy noggin is just protecting you from the most awful truths of itself.
I mean, that just sums up the human condition, man. That's why I tell people, don't sweat the decisions. Don't sweat the choices you'll make, because your good buddy, your brain, is just going to smooth it all over. It's going to tell you you made the right choice. It's going to say, this is how it was meant to be.
That is exactly right.
So just do what you want.
Yeah, don't think too hard.
Yeah,
Unless
that's called
you're going to drill a hole in your brain and then maybe think real hard
cognitive
about it and say no.
dissonance. Well, they seemed happy with it, so do it.
Yeah, maybe. There was also linked in the show notes. Please don't drill a hole in your head, people. This is my
well, if
legal
you're
disclaimer.
going to drill a hole in your head based off one podcast you listen to, like, that's on you.
Wah, wah. But there is a blog entry from like 2000 that I dug up somewhere, and the guy is talking about how he did it all himself, by himself, and did all these things. And he's like, it's so great, it's so great, it's so great. And then after a month, he's like, yeah, it's not great. I totally faked myself out about it. And I was like, well, I guess good for you that you could recognize that.
Yeah, so it was like it was bad, or he was just like, it's no different.
It's no different.
Aw.
Yeah, I know. It was
Kind of like getting a puppy.
It's kind of a trip. Again, I recommend going through the source notes on this one, guys. It's fun. All right. So before we wrap up, because we're fucking long, this was a trip. In the best way, not in an LSD hole in your brain
hole
way.
In your head trip. I feel enlightened and childlike wonder.
I'm just gonna dip my toe into a little bit of philosophizing here about retaining the lightness and curiosity of childhood, right? That these people seem to be longing for. And my overwhelming thought was, yeah, it's great, but we can't all stay kids forever. I mean, eventually our brains, they need to mature. They literally need to solidify, as in like clothes.
Yeah.
In a way, our thinking or belief, like we have to eventually land on something, be open to change, but also keep some of those things as core. And I was just thinking as I was doing this research is maybe the future of our society isn't the movie Idiocracy, as I had always thought, just adults getting dumber, dumber, dumber until we're all the blind leading the blind. Maybe it will be a world full of adult children who've refused to grow up, refused to make choices, and who are just herded and governed by those of us who have decided to grow up.
See, I'm with you up until that point because I feel like what growing up is to do with survival, right? It's when you have to actually like function in the world. Mm-hmm. And I go back to domestication, where domestication is keeping animals in
about that all
adolescent type state. And I think about it a lot with my dumb dogs. Is they throw their bodies around for like a morsel of food. And I'm like,
a molecule.
food.
food.
When are they? I ask them all the time, when are y'all going to wise up? Because a wolf pack would not tolerate this kind of nonsense. Like, think about wising up. You're 7. Like, come on. Yeah. And it's just like, that's what I mean. Have to. But the people who have life hard are the ones who are forced to then mature. So those aren't really the ones who are governing and like telling us what to do.
Not yet.
But I do think that we are drastically accelerating towards domestication for humans, which is why we have these new stages of life called childhood, called adolescence, teenagers, young adulthood. Now young people adults. are rejecting the idea of being an adult until they're 30, right? Yeah. And so then eventually they'll be like, I'm just a 40-year-old teenager, right? And it's just like, we'll never grow up.
Yeah. And that's the future that this whole thing made me think of. And it made me sad.
I mean, it's fun to be a kid, but like, I don't know. Am I grown up? Who knows?
I think you're pretty grown up.
I don't want to drill a hole in my head if that's any indication.
That's the litmus test. In which case,
but it makes
we're
sense
adults.
Because these are when you think of like that domestication angle, like these are the rich kids. They don't have to fight for survival. They don't have to make choices and like
they got too much fucking time on their hands. They got too much fucking time on their hands. They're navel gazing all the time.
So that's why it's like, it's more about they have the luxury of not having to grow up and like wanting to recapture that.
Yep. All right, that's it. That's my trip for the week. This one was a trip. Fucking doozy. I had a ton of fun on this one. Write me your questions because I feel like I didn't. This was long as is, and I'm open to more questions and more talking about this because I did a lot of research.
I mean, I still have several, but I'll email them to you, and you get back to me in 3 to 5 business days. Please.
Root at ImpoliteSocietyPodcast.com.
Or text us. There's a link in the show notes.
Text us your quick questions.
Quick questions, and we'll answer them on another show. Maybe we can incorporate some kind of call and response into the chats.
Oh, yeah. In the society chats. I got it now. Took me a second.
Yeah. They're new. We're learning.
But anyways.
Chat? a chat?
A chat?
A cat? A cat? But check those out. And you know what gives us a sense of euphoria more than a hole in the brain? When you rate and review us on your podcasting app of choice. That is how we grow our cult of people who have holy brains, or holy entire whole brains,
Holier than thou. That was one thing I saw in one of the articles I read. And I was like, that's
Well,
clever.
that's there. Holier than thou cult. And if you really want to help do that, be sure to recommend this podcast to somebody who you think needs a little bit more brain or a little bit less brain, because this topic is all about that. We also are on YouTube, which if you're listening there, shout out. God bless that discoverability feature. So if you're listening on YouTube, thank you for joining us. If you prefer YouTube, get rid of Spotify, get rid of Podcast Addict, and find us there. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another rude topic. And until then, stay curious
And keep marching to the beat of your own drum. And also, let us know if you think that the next alternative health treatment from the Alex Jones crowd is going to be a hole in your head. Because I'm telling you, I think it's due for a comeback.
Nobody's going to be brave enough for that. We can't be that uncomfortable.
People are going to do it.
I don't think so. My favorite part of this episode was when you said, you're like John Lennon. And I said, yes. It's just like off the top of my head. I'm like, yeah, I am like John Lennon. I'm a visionary and mind of a generation.
So he promised people that trepanning, I can't fucking all this research. I can't even fucking say it.